In the Torah portion, the parasha that we're going to read this Shabbos, so we said yesterday that there's the story of Bilam and how strangely Bilam, who was really far from being a friend of the Jewish people, lands up becoming that individual who gives us the prophecies about Moshiach. So there are quite a number of things that he says. One of the things that he says is, Er'enu v'loi ata, I see him, but not now. Ashurenu v'loi korov, and I discern him, but he's not close. And then he says, Dorach koichav mi Yaakov, that a star will shoot out from Yaakov, v'kam shevet mi Yisrael, and a shevet, which is basically the staff of rulership, will rise up from Israel. So the question is, what does it mean when he says that a star will shoot out from Yaakov? Well, what's a star suddenly got to do with this? He's talking about a leader, that makes sense. And he's talking about the leader called Moshiach. Okay, that makes sense. But what's the star got to do with anything? So there are various commentaries. For example, the Rambam is of the view that he's referring in this pasuk to two major leaders, one at the beginning of the dynasty and one at the end of the dynasty. So in other words, he says the first part, because you'll notice that the verse says things in doubles. It says, I see him, but not now. I discern it. Well, that sounds like you're saying the same thing. A star will shoot out and a staff. So the Rambam says that each of these verses of the prophecy of Bilam are referring to two personalities. The first reference is always to King David, and the second reference is to Moshiach. So the concept over there is that there's the beginning of the dynasty King David, and then the completion, the culmination of the dynasty Moshiach. That's one way of explaining it. Rashi sees it in a different way. Rashi says that the star over here refers to stars are a symbol of mazel. So when it says that a star will shoot out from Yaakov, it means that there'll be a new mazel for the Jewish people. In other words, a kind of a better mazel, an improved mazel for the Jewish people. And what will the mazel be? V'kam shevet mi Yisrael, that a new leader will arise, and that leader will lead us. And he says it all refers to King David, at least in this pasuk, and only later will we talk about Moshiach. But many of the other commentaries say that Dorach koichav mi Yaakov, that the star that we're referring over here, that refers to Moshiach. It's talking about Moshiach, and that's pretty much how most people understand it, that it's talking about Moshiach. But what's interesting, though, is there's one commentary that says Dorach koichav mi Yaakov refers to every single Jewish person. So now that's interesting because, as long as you're talking about a leader and a stellar leader, so that's why it's associated with the stars, that makes a lot of sense. But it's interesting when it could possibly refer to you and I. Like, how do you reconcile the two of them? If you're talking about Moshiach, you're talking about one kind of a prophecy that's talking about a really great individual who's going to usher in a whole turnabout in terms of how the world works. And if you're talking about you and I, well, you and I, we're kind of ordinary people. I don't know if any of us is starting a revolution anytime soon that's going to radicalize the whole world and turn us into this reality of Moshiach. So what does it mean? Now, when you have multiple interpretations of a single pasuk, they are all related to each other, even though on the face of it sometimes they look like they contradict each other, like this example, because the one says it's talking about a hero called Moshiach, and the other one says it's talking about ordinary people like us. So even though on the face of it, it seems to be a contradiction, but the rule is that when you have various commentaries on the same pasuk in the Torah, then you have to say that there's a link between them all. So if there's a commentary that says it's referring to Moshiach, and another commentary that says that it's referring to you and I, there has to be a link between them. So what's the link? It reminds me a little bit of a story. In the 60s, there was a group of students who came to see the Rebbe, and they were given an incredible opportunity to ask all kinds of questions. So one of the questions that they asked the Rebbe is, what is a Rebbe? Okay, it's a pretty good question, I suppose, if you have the opportunity to speak to the individual directly. So what is a Rebbe? And they wanted to know if a Rebbe is a miracle worker. Can a Rebbe perform miracles? So the Rebbe was very patient with them, and the Rebbe said that every single one of us has a neshama, and the neshama has incredible potential and incredible power. And our neshama connects us directly with Hashem. It's just that, unfortunately, for many of us, we're not really aware of the neshama and aware of the ability that our neshama has. And a Rebbe is somebody who's fully aware of the neshama and fully aware of the connection between themselves and Hashem that the neshama affords them. So that's the difference between a Rebbe and an ordinary person. We're all the same neshama. It's just a question of how revealed our neshama is. And incidentally, by the way, then he said, and together we'll perform a miracle. So together, right now, you want to know if I'm a miracle worker, we'll perform a miracle together. And he said, what's the miracle? Every one of you will undertake to do a mitzvah that you would never have dreamt of doing, and that will be the miracle. So that relates very much to this conversation as well. What's Moshiach? Is Moshiach some kind of a superhero? You know, in Marvel Comics is their superheroes, and lahavdil, the Jews have our superheroes. Some guy who's going to arrive and he's going to be very impressive and he's going to perform and he's going to do miracles and he's going to change the world. Is that Moshiach? Is that how we're supposed to understand Moshiach? I suppose if that's what we're looking forward to, we may firstly not see and notice him when he comes, because we'll be looking for the man with a red flowing cape. And we might be a little disappointed when he comes, because we're waiting for some kind of a hero to arrive. What is Moshiach? Moshiach is an individual who expresses the deepest part of the neshama. And in such an open way, in such a clear way, that when you see this individual, it motivates you and it inspires you to get in touch with your own neshama. That's what Moshiach is, more than anything else. There's a period of time that Moshiach ushers in, which is a time of miracles and a time of godly revelation. But Moshiach, the person, the Moshiach person is somebody who is in touch with the depth of his neshama, to the absolute. And it's so overwhelming for us and it's so attractive to us that inspires us. We also want to get in touch with our own neshamas. Now flip that around for a second. That therefore means that if there's a person called Moshiach who is a highly developed neshama, then the corollary of that is there's a part of my neshama that is already a Moshiach. In other words, there is Moshiach, the leader, the individual who's going to be an outstanding human being who we all look towards and we learn from. And there is an internal Moshiach. What's an internal Moshiach? Again, Moshiach is the neshama revealed. That means that every single one of us has a built-in Moshiach within ourselves. If we were to be in touch with the real power of our own neshama, we would have a personal Moshiach experience. We'd be liberated from our toxic way of thinking and of behaving and our depression and our anxiety and our insecurities and our temptations and our laziness and the whole list of things that we tackle. Everybody believes that in order to grow and to change and to overcome all of those things, you need a laundry list of things to do. So because I'm lazy, I've got to work a way to motivate myself. And because I feel temptation, I have to find a way to control myself. And because I'm anxious, I have to find a way to settle myself. And because I feel depressed, I have to find a way to lift myself. And by the time you've finished with all of the things that you have to do, you're so overwhelmed by all the solutions that you're supposed to find that you actually feel worse than you were when you started. Which is probably a good summary of life in the 21st century. Everybody has so many different methods. I'm trying this and I'm doing that kind of breathing exercise and that kind of toning and this kind of stretching and that kind of exercise and that kind of supplement and this kind of therapy. And that. By the time you turn around, you're so ausgemattet, you're so exhausted from all the different ways of trying to help yourself that you actually feel, I'm worse off trying to help myself. There's an alternative. The alternative is that we don't, as the world would like us to believe, take a view that all the solutions that I need in my life are out there. So I've got to go shopping around to all those different places to find all of those solutions. And that's exhausting and frustrating and expensive. Instead, what the Torah says is the solution lies within. But what does it mean the solution lies within? The core of my being is solid. The real me, if I were to be in touch with the real me is solid. The real me is not insecure. The real me is willing to accept who I am and what I'm capable of, and I don't have to be envious of somebody else who's different and capable of something else. The real me has a sense of very healthy simcha, which is not that I dance on the rooftops. It's just that I'm very solidly okay with my circumstances. If this is what Hashem wants from me, then I'm good with that. The real me is inspired. The real me feels a connection to Hashem. The real me is not so easily distracted, because the real me appreciates that all of those temptations are not really worth so much. That's my inner Moshiach. In the same way as when Moshiach comes, it's not like a million things about the world are going to change. One thing is going to change. That's it. Our world today has many problems because our world today lacks one overriding consciousness, and that is Ein Oid Milvadoi. There's only Hashem. That's the only truth. And therefore, everything else that we are seeing, we're just filtering through our own perceptions, but we're not seeing it for what it is. That's why we're so stressed and overwhelmed, etc. So in the same way as Moshiach brings one major adjustment to the world, to reveal Hashem in the world, the internal personal Moshiach is one major adjustment to me. Rather than to see myself as a composite of a mind and a heart and dreams and aspirations and ambitions and disappointments, what we're supposed to try to discover is, I see myself as a neshama, and a neshama is one with Hashem. Not just a neshama in its most kind of superficial sense, the real essence of my neshama, the real me, and I've got to dig deep in order to find that part of myself. But there's a Moshiach in me. And the best way that we can, as everybody wants to, bring Moshiach, how do you bring Moshiach? What do you start screaming and shouting, Moshiach, Moshiach, and how do we bring Moshiach? By working to the best of our abilities to discover the inner Moshiach that I have, to discover and get in touch with my own neshama, and specifically what we call the Yechida level of the neshama, which is the deepest part of the neshama, which deserves at least another shira of its own. But if that's my focus, and if that's what I'm trying to achieve, and when I understand that every mitzvah that I do is an opportunity to discover my neshama and my innate connection with Hashem, and that every time I learn Torah, it's an opportunity to get in touch with my neshama and my innate connection with Hashem. And I try my best, because we're not supposed to get 10 out of 10, then we'd be angels. But we try at least, we look at least, we dig to try and get in touch with our neshama. That's the personal Moshiach. And if we can make a step to reveal the personal Moshiach, that's why in the same words you have the message, it's referring to every one of us, and it's referring to Moshiach. Because when every one of us tries to discover the internal Moshiach, that's actually what brings Moshiach.